So our final guest this evening, I have to just give a little preface here. I read one of her poems online several years ago and then showed it to everybody I knew, and then discovered that she lived in Chicago, but I had no way to contact her, so I found her on Twitter and stalked her until she agreed to come to Tuesday Funk. It is one of my proudest moments at Tuesday Funk. And now she comes back every year, and it's the best, and I'm like, oh, it's cool. So glad you're here, whatever. Whatever. So anyway, our final guest this evening is a poet, essayist, editor, performer, and educator. Her first book, Your Invitation to a Modest Breakfast, won the National Poetry Series in 2011. In 2014, she received a Ruth Lilly Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. You can find her writing on the Poetry Foundation website and in magazines such as The Believer, Jubilant, Fanzine, and the American Poetry Review. On the 23rd of this month, she will be the host of Art Show Tonight, a monthly art and music late-night show at the Burlington in Logan Square. Please welcome back to Tuesday Funk, Hannah Gamble.
Hello. Happy to be back. This is one of my favorite places to read ever, if not the. I'm going to read maybe just 5, maybe 6 poems. If you happen to be the kind of people who like to buy books and want a nice note written just for you, in the front of that book I have some books in my purse and I'll write you a nice note. And here's some poems. So the first one that I'm going to read, do you guys know the poet Mary Ruefle? Anybody? Yeah.
I'm drunk with her.
Oh! I know you, Connie Voisin. We're friends on Facebook. I know you're a poet. Mary Ruefle bought me a sandwich when I was like 18 and first writing poems. She bought me a sandwich and was like, "Your poems are wearing too much eyeshadow." Mainly the gesturing I'm doing is to indicate that she is a literal giant person. And this is a poem that is a little bit about her. It's a story that I heard from someone who knew her. Here it is. Tiny yellow and blue threads. Imagine a poet leading a Lit Mag intern to the back of the offices. In the faculty kitchen, she opens the door to a small fridge. It's mostly empty and overtaken by ice crystals. The intern sees that the poet has placed small animal figurines in the bottom of the fridge. "Look," the poet says, "they're sleeping." So the takeaway was, don't try to solicit this poet for your Lit Mag by email. She does not use it. Instead, send her some kind of package with assorted fantastical goods. I went to a Lit Fest in Seattle and I saw this poet read in a tiny wooden room with a purple skylight. After the reading in the lobby, I saw the poet standing about 5 yards away. "Hey," I said, throwing up a hand, "I love your poems." She looked frightened. And I realized that what I should have done was cut a stag out of fibrous, thick handmade paper and move it slowly towards her on a dowel rock. She has the temperament of a saint who spends too much time recovering in bed. Though she has been lauded as much as someone willing to lash out a bit at students not reaching their full potential. A saint is like a person who just will not dance, just does not feel comfortable dancing, and is fine with those personal limitations and fine with missing any fun that might be missed in adhering to the preference of her large internal world versus the small external one. This person says, "Very well, thank you," and continues to wrap tiny yellow and blue threads around whatever leaves and sticks they picked up on the way to the lecture. That's it. And I realize that sounds like a roast, but I must tell you, in case it's not clear, I adore this woman. I adore her poems. They mean so much to me. The first book that I wrote has a poem that's modeled on one of hers. I mean, she's just amazing. Yeah. Let's see. Let's move on and let's do one about France. I have to tell you that I think I'm gonna at some point write an article that will just be talking about how I hate all the other articles that are like, learn how French women stay skinny. It's because, you know, they care about food and they love it in a way you don't even know how. And like, I saw one that was like, French women don't even use the term self-care because they're so beyond it, like it's just like one of the cells of their body how much they love it. Like, it's very irritating to me because I lived in France and what I observed was that French women stayed skinny by having eating disorders that they put upon their daughters. I knew a mother and a daughter who would just like split an avocado for dinner. And I was constantly, well, with the first French lady I lived with, she was always forcing me to get on a scale and then yelling at me, but she did nothing but feed me pasta with sort of an orange grease on it, even though I was paying her a lot of money, or like my exchange program was paying her a lot of money to feed me quiche and salad and stuff, but she literally would just give me like a pudding cup and a bunch of pasta with grease on it. So anyway, this is a poem about other things that happened in France. Always given. I do not possess that which I produce. My father reads the Tao Te Ching. My mother makes faces in the shape of human heads. Where does it come from, what comes from me? Elsewhere, my 4-year-old dog has just been born. In the top dresser drawer, I had a terrible fight with my mother when I was 16. We're just worried that no one will like you. Having been reared in deference and obedience, I was pushed into a doorway by a man from the pub. I knew I couldn't fight him off, or that even if I could, there would be 5 others like him waiting. So I chose to welcome him in my way. Other women were nearby, so I wasn't afraid. He kissed my neck and I said, "Oh yeah, people tend to like that." He bit my earlobe and I said, "Oh yeah, going for the ear." I was trying to be above him, above the doorway, above the street, above the other women who wouldn't have handled it as well. The women nearby were grinning in on the joke I was trying to make of the man. But all of us were mistaken. The man didn't care enough to be humiliated. I thought I was winning by welcoming something I hated and deciding to find it funny. Years later, I told a friend the funny story of how, on a French dance floor, a big man in a rain poncho kept flapping my hips and ass with his enormous and erect, although clothed penis. And my friend's face widened like an aperture, then fell like an old leaf. Only upon seeing my friend's face did I see that I had been mistaken about what was the joke and who was the joke. I tried to and succeeded in never making that mistake again, but due to the ever-unfolding nature of the universes created daily by the curious person, the opportunities for new mistakes are always given. I am going to read a poem that I wrote for my friend Kevin. He when I knew him, he was a really bad alcoholic. But then after I moved to Chicago, he got very addicted to opioid stuff, and he was like my friend who I thought he might be the first friend of mine to die. He might die. And he has been through rehab a lot, and he's alive and he's sober, but he is like a 33-year-old man who has never had a job. And so he doesn't know what to do. Like if I ever developed an opioid addiction, I would at least have just sort of the habit of working, because I started working when I was like 15. So even if I was like barely functional human being, I could remember how to lie on a job application about certain choice things, you know. But I'm reading this poem for Kevin because actually it's really great. He just recently got approved for Section 8 housing, so even though he was texting me like probably, I don't know, like a month ago, like saying, well, I'm moving into the men's shelter on Monday, and I was just really freaking out about that, and I was so close to saying like, come to Chicago and just be homeless in Chicago so I can just, because I mean I have a studio apartment and a very big dog, and I cannot put him up for more than a couple weeks, but I thought if he was going to be homeless, he could be homeless in Chicago and I could just check on him and make sure he had what he needed. But he finally, after like 3 years of being on this waiting list, got approved for Section 8 housing. So I'm like really excited about that, and this is a poem I wrote for him a few years ago. Holy people. After a very bad thing happens, it may feel like you will never call your mother back. The bathroom was quiet and well lit, and you hid there. It's not that anyone was being unkind. It's just that it had been hours of talking without intensity or connection. Newspaper articles are beginning to discuss what it means to hide in bathrooms. Hiding because someone insulted you in a faculty meeting is different than hiding because there's been too much talk and too little of everything else. When you wake up, that's when the mosquito begins. You might be a holy person. Holy people never feel at home, so they make trouble for everyone while looking exhausted. In any case, I hope you'll come outside soon. Mostly you just have to stop worshiping the idea of you being horrible. I like you better than almost anyone, and the fact you don't agree with me that you're worth something hurts my feelings. I've never had to tell you why we write. You always seem to know it. But I guess there are other things you think you know, and it's not really up to me to change your mind. I still tried though, didn't I? A prehistoric woman with swinging breasts banging and banging on a coconut. So I'm gonna read one more poem, and I'm just trying to decide which one I want that to be. Actually, you know what? I'll read this one that actually my friend Kevin also is in, because before we were friends, we dated for like 2 months, but I had to break up with him because he was an alcoholic, but he's a great person, and he's one of the smartest people I know, and he comes up in this poem because he has created the myth of the slow-moving iceberg that would crush the lowly scrub pine. And so you'll learn about that in this poem. It would continue. Rough skin on my big toe when I move it to make sure that some part of me is touching you while we sleep. Once we had a fight that you say was just a tough conversation. Heterosexual relationships, am I right? That. To me, it sounded cold and flat when you said, go on, hit the lights. So then whenever you moved your hand or foot towards me sleeping, I moved closer to the wall, thinking you were asking me for more space. But you didn't accept that. You reached out till you found me, and then you explained in the morning. I felt relieved and came to understand you as someone who will stay close even when angry. I knew years ago, in a different city altogether, that I was done with feelings, or that they weren't enough. A different man saying, I feel so awful that I couldn't keep my promise to you. And me saying, I don't want to know about your feelings. I want you to change your behavior. That moment led that man to call me the slow-moving iceberg that would crush the lowly scrub pine. You asked me what he meant. I explained that in that moment he'd seen a cold, glowing orb in my center. It didn't not love him, it just had no idea that he existed. It would continue. It was pure will. It would continue and would crush anything that didn't move or join it. But I felt you joining me, and I felt me joining you. Sometimes we don't talk much or look at each other. You retrieve my bike helmet while I unlock your bike from the post. Thank you.